Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Sunday, August 9th. Had a great meditation this morning. It's that sun group meditation. And I had these thoughts last night. And I haven't finished my other video that's going up on Monday morning, but I want to make the voiceover introduction for Tuesday because I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to stick this at the end of the video because I think this stuff is like more important stuff for people, because it's not something that you hear. Like you probably, I doubt you've ever heard something like this before. So this is about confusing greatness for practice, right? Where you think somebody's great, but it's really about practice, and also about proper utilization of one's resources. So when you look at a great athlete, like somebody who is an all-star athlete, there's some initial athletic talent. The person has to be athletically talented, so that's something. But that's something you're born with, right? Like that's something you have. It's everybody has something, like some sort of gift that sets them apart, something that they are specialized in, something that they can do better than other people. You might not be the greatest at something, but you are above average at some specialized skill, and maybe multiple specialized skills. That talent is there, and then it depends on the person to cultivate that talent. And the main cultivation of that talent is practicing, spending time, resources, and energy into honing your skill and becoming great at it, and spending more time and more effort than other people with similar talents. Now there is something where people will break through. They'll have some kind of epiphany or some kind of moment where they just go to a higher level. They turn their practice and their talent into art. Like someone becomes an artist at their particular craft. And so that's something like that. That is something to be admired, like that part of it. But the main thing is practice. So when I was a kid, I was a basketball player, and I had dreams of being a great basketball player. And I don't know when it was, like when I was in high school or when I was in college, something like that. But I lived near the Basketball Hall of Fame, and the Basketball Hall of Fame was kind of a neat place because I don't know about the other Hall of Fames, but they have this one place where they have baskets where you can shoot, like a shooting range, like this kind of cool thing. And I'd gone there a number of times, because it was, Springfield, Massachusetts is really close to Hartford, Connecticut, and then I lived up there, in the Northampton area, which is also close to Springfield. And so I went to the Basketball Hall of Fame like 3 or 4 times. And there was one time I went there. My brother was a basketball player, and he used to talk about some of the old school players, guys I'd seen and known their names, but really didn't see them play. And I was, by the entrance, and these 6 Hall of Famers come in. These are basketball legends, and I can't remember, their names because, it's years ago. But they were, big, giant guys. Like one of the guys was in a wheelchair, and none of them could walk normally, and their hands were all fucked up. Like they walked in, and I'm like, these guys are like cripples, right? Their bodies had been ravaged by overuse, by doing too much, right? By putting too much of their life energy, and they look like dead inside. Like you see these athletes, they often die young. Of course, football players, it's even worse. Their bodies suffer too much traumatic, collisions and just being pushed too far in your joints and your all these parts of your body that are not supposed to receive that kind of, like, how many times are you supposed to jump in your life, right? Like you're just running and jumping and pushing yourself when you're fatigued and these types of things, right? And so there's a price. I realized, well, there's a price for greatness, and that's these old time athletes that there wasn't the level of play and the amount of practice wasn't nearly what it is now. The skills that you have to develop, like these sports evolve, and the competition grows global, and it becomes, more of a there's more of a pot of a pool of people who are fighting for these positions as the money becomes more, the fame and the money becomes more, and everything they start, going out to different places and looking for giant people around the world in the case of basketball. And, once where there was, hundreds of thousands of potential players that, are competing, now there's millions across the globe that are all competing for these a few spots, and so the competition becomes more intense, right? Just like with academics or anything else, right? The more that the more that's at stake, the more money, the more it gets developed, the more popular it becomes, the more people that aspire to do it. There was I'd watched the ABA thing, this documentary, and Dr. J was my favorite basketball player, my first like sort of favorite basketball player. And he was a great dunker. He could, he dunked in game dunker. And there was a highlight of some of his dunks, and I forgot, like, things you don't even see now. He had giant hands, and he would be able to dunk the ball. And I don't think they fouled as much, and they put as much effort into stopping him from dunking as there is now, and there was not like in the talent pool. But there are a few other things I saw, like a interview that somebody did about their first time meeting Michael Jordan as a teammate, and this there's a few of these kind of things where there's this basketball player named Will Perdue. He was a center, and he was being interviewed by a former Kentucky basketball legend and NBA player, Rex Chapman. Rex Chapman, who was like a great high school player, and he realized he went back and watched some of his high school tape, and he has a podcast, and he was talking about how he saw himself walking up the court, like he wasn't, trying as hard. He didn't. It was high school, like he didn't have to. And then he went to Kentucky, which has a legendary basketball program, and how hard it was is when he realized how much more work he had to put in practice. And this guy Will Perdue was talking about like he saw what it was going to take and what Michael Jordan would put in practicing, and you hear about these stories about how these guys are at the gym and 5 in the morning, like LeBron and these various people being great players because they have to practice more. Kobe Bryant, there's some legendary story about him and the Olympic team, where there's all these great players, and Kobe would be at the gym at 4 in the morning, like he'd get up earlier, and he was, quoted by one of these guys as saying, if I've already put in 3 hours more of practice, of training than you have, then how are you going to compete as those hours accumulate over the off season, leading into the season where he's put in 1,000, 10,000 more, hours of practice. He's thrown up, thousands of more shots, right? And, there's these guys, Penn and Teller, and they're kind of demonic. One of the guys doesn't talk. The other they're magicians. And one of the guys said, with some simple illusionary trick, with a ball and a string or some shit like that. Here, I found the exact quote. This is a great quote. This is from Teller, the guy who never talks. Sometimes magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone else might reasonably expect. Right? So like to create these illusions, they would practice and practice and practice to the point where it becomes seamless and it almost seems magical. These sleight of hand things because of the amount of time they would put in. An obscene amount of time. And that's with all these things I'm talking about. Like who's going to shoot 10,000 shots, basketball shots in a month or whatever, or over a summer? I mean, think about, or whatever it is, maybe even more than that. You're practicing the same dribble move over and fucking over again. So if you spend time with great people, you would see that they spend an unreasonable amount of time on something mundane and boring. This is where, athletics for me was I reached a level where, when I was a little kid, like I was, playing soccer for the first time. I was in, I think, first grade. I think I played first, second, third, or no, it was second, third, fourth grade. Because fourth grade, I missed our championship year. There's a group of kids, we were all about the same age. And I got a lot of kind of funny stories from there. Like we were practicing soccer, with our coach he was one of the few people, he was kind of a, I would say nerdy kind of guy. I think he was in college, and he had been a great soccer player, but nobody played soccer, right? Like, it was like nobody at that time, so this is the 1970s. And one day we were waiting for him. His name was Craig, and he was kind of nerdy. He was a good guy. And we were kicking the ball against a tennis fence. There was a couple of guys playing tennis, and one guy was getting pissed off. Like he was getting pissed off at his inability to beat the other guy. He was losing. And then he'd get pissed off at us because we're kicking the ball against the fence. And he's yelling at us to get away. And we're like, fuck you. We're like little kids. And one of the guys kicks the ball and it goes over the fence and it's heading right into the guy's court. And he goes to kick it and he misses and he falls down. And he takes the ball and, you know, throws it the other way and he threatens to like beat us up. And one of the kids goes, "Yeah, well, you're not gonna be able to. You wait till our coach goes up. You won't be able to beat a brute like Craig." And Craig was kind of whippy, So there's these things. That one time my parents didn't pick me up from soccer and I had cleats on. It was cold as shit. It was like November, and I looked it up later. It was 2 miles from my house, and I was a kid and was sitting in the back seat of the car, and I walked home, but like I don't even know how I got there, kind of thing. Like I'd been to this park. There was a pond my dad used to take me to when I used to go fishing for bluegills. And there's a stream near it. One time I was walking around the stream with a bucket, and there was a big ass fish. It must have been laying eggs, it was like a salmon or a trout or something. And it was like, it was bigger than the bucket. And I scooped it up because I thought it was dead. And it started to wriggle and shit because it was like sitting there laying eggs. The stream was halfway out of the water. Anyways, the first year, soccer comes down to what they call penalty kicks. Like if the game is tied, and it's tied all the fucking time, and a lot of times that tie is 0-0 because it's a very low scoring game because you can't use your hands. It's more of a defensive game like hockey. And if it's tied and they go into overtime and like nobody scores, it ends in a tie. Each team picks 5 players to do penalty kicks. And penalty kicks are fairly easy to score on, but not when you're a little kid. And so our coach said, everyone should practice these and we'll have a tryout. And so I went home and I took some rope and I had this chain link fence, like a metal fence, right? And I made a box that was about, a foot and a half, 2 feet by 2 feet, right? Like on the fence. And it was like 1 foot off the ground. And then it was right next to the fence post. So for whatever period of time between the time my coach told us that we were going to, do this, drill, right? The tryout for the goal kicks. I went home every day after school and I kicked the ball into this box to where I would hit it into the box, kicking. It was like 10 feet. And, so I did it like so much that I could just put it in the box or pretty much close to the box every time. And unless I hit the pole, unless I hit the post, which became almost never. It was unstoppable because it was so close to the post, unless the goalie was standing, like knew where I was going to kick it. Like right there, they'd have to, because usually the goalie would stand in the middle. The soccer goal is 24 feet apart, and it should be smaller for kids because it's like fucking, it's hard for adults to stop this thing. And, the goal is huge for a kid, like, 24 feet. And so the kid's got to guard a 20 foot feet, goal, 12 feet on either side. And it's almost impossible. They're standing in the middle. Unless you kick it right at them, they have no chance. So I was able to making it in the air too. Like it was like a foot in the air. So it was off the ground, but and so we went to try out and I was like probably the smallest kid on the team. And, there's a lot of older kids, but there's a bunch of kids my age there. And, of course, none of those kids had a chance because they were just young and, they didn't practice. And I think we all took 10 shots and I, put it in the same spot 10 times, right? Ball placement. Like when they throw a pitch and there's pitcher, places the ball where they want it. And my coach was like, how the fuck did you do that, right? Because I went home and I practiced like, in a way that a little kid wouldn't practice, right? And I, as I got older, I could do that. Playing basketball is called working on your game. You'd go out and you'd work on your game. Like you would go and, be alone on the basketball court and you'd work on these various skills. And I could do that and get better, but at some point it'd get boring. Like, your hands start to hurt from, if you're shooting a jump shot, like your fingertips start to hurt after a while because of the friction of the ball when you're you do this thing where you sort of flick your wrist and put backspin on the ball, and your things start to hurt, like your joints and even as a younger person, and it just gets boring. And I realized that then I wouldn't even be putting effort into making it. I'd just be like kind of over it. And I kind of realized then that I didn't really, I mean, it wasn't enough for me. Like basketball wasn't enough. When you come across great players and you see how much effort and time they put in and their level of skill, and you're like, and you realize how much time you would have to put in and what it would cost you in terms of your old age. Like you're going to put your energy, your jing, your creative force, you're going to use too much of it. Like stuff that's supposed to be meant for your old age, you're going to use your life energy, and then your body's going to be mangled and wrecked. All that stuff. When I saw those players at the whatever it is. So when people think about greatness, and also your personal life's going to suffer. You only have so much time and energy every day, right? You only have so much you know, whatever you would call it. You don't have so much of that energy that you can put into your day, right? When you start having kids and you start having a job and you start having a relationship, you have, marriage, and like, what are you going to put your energy into? Like, what things, are you going to put more energy into your work and neglect your family? Are you going to put more energy into your family and neglect your job? Are you going to put more energy into your kids and neglect your wife or your husband? Because it becomes something like this, right? You only have so much energy. I've talked about this before. The human beings should be living much longer lives. There's a shark that lives something like 500 years. There's turtles that live hundreds of years. There's parrots that live, 70 years. Like there's animals that live much longer than people. And, our lives are shortened for a reason. We were built as slaves and genetically modified, but we should live hundreds or even thousands of years. And there's, in the Mahabharata and some of these ancient texts, people used to live much longer lives. It's even in the Bible. There was a period of time where people would live hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And if you live that long, you could do so much more. Like you wouldn't have to, like right now when you become an adult, you turn 20 or 30 years old, you're working on your career, you're getting married, and you're having a family. And just that alone is, you're overwhelmed and you're asked out. Your time is, and your energy is used up on a daily basis. When I wrote this book called this book called A Soldier of an Existence. It was about transforming abuse, like, because I worked in an abuse field. And this was I did this thing called Truthi Counseling. I had this spiritual epiphany. And I was working at a treatment center with teenage sex offenders. And we lived in a apartment that was a college apartment, and it was infested by thousands of cockroaches. And there were 6 kids, 2 kids from my ex's previous situation. And then 4 kids, the last one was born. He was a home birth. And, my ex was unstable mentally, psychologically. And I worked in this like prison-like environment with the worst fucking population. And the place was abusive and twisted and fucked up, the administration and all of it. Like, incredibly difficult job. Like one of the higher stress jobs that you could have. And then I would come home to this chaos with all these kids, 4 kids in 5 years, young kids. And my ex, who was, just always kind of a mess, a psychologically fucked up person. And my life was just like stress 24 hours a day, like just constant stress. And, I had this kind of realization, and I knew I needed some time to put it together. Like I just didn't have time to think. And, never mind doing the spiritual practice that I had been doing for years. Like just my spiritual practice, I could barely squeeze it in. The meditation and the other things, right? Like, and, I had that in my life. Other people don't even have that. I was still meditating, but I wasn't able to read the books and focus in on it and spend time. And, and I had less time available. And sometimes I get pulled out of meditation to do whatever, change a diaper, or fucking deal with something, whatever it was. And I realized that, like, I just couldn't grasp, this kind of stuff that stuff like I'm talking about right now. Like I couldn't have this process where I meditate and I think about something and, I'm able to articulate it here. Like I knew there were things, information coming to me and things that were happening, but I couldn't, put it together because I was just so fucking busy and stressed out and worn out all the time. And that's how most people are. That's why I don't, that people are just overwhelmed by their lives. They don't have time to be not a sheeple. Like they have to be a sheeple because they have to rely on the system so much. And if they had doubt in the system, and then they're already, working so hard, their life is so stressful and they're so overwhelmed all the time. They don't have time to, to even question things, right? And if you're dealing with family stuff, you have a family, you're a young family, you have a job and a relationship, and God knows what other things are going on in your life, things that you have. Sometimes you have 2, 3 jobs, whatever it is, right? And whatever you're trying to do in your life, and you don't have time and energy to do all those things well. You're probably doing one or more of them really poorly. You have to sacrifice one for the other. And so if you're like a professional athlete or, musician or you're working on some kind of art form, a writer, to be great, you have to put so much time in your energy. You only have so much energy when you wake up during the day, right? You have, the energy that you get from sleeping, the morning energy where you have to, the most energy. Like if you had one of those things that they have video games that measures your life force, right? And you have this life force, you have the maximum amount of life force you're going to have for that day in the morning. And then, you start doing shit. You start, working, dealing with kids, dealing with whatever, getting ready for your day. And then that energy gets used up. Like then you eat a meal, you take a nap, you power up a little bit more and you go back at it and the energy eventually dissipates to where you're just, knocked out and you're, tired and you're sore and you go to sleep and you start over the next day, right? And so these people that practice one thing, they have to neglect all these other areas of their lives, right? They don't have energy and time for their relationships. They have to be obsessed with their craft and put all that energy into their craft. And if they come up short, like if they don't, like make the MBA or they don't become a professional musician, they don't find a way to monetize this greatness, a bunch of people go, wow, you're really great at that, right? I mean, you see people do things like there's those guys, Dude Perfect, where they'll take these trick shots and they do shit like that. And if you see the amount of times they do it, it's not impressive, right? If you see how much time and energy, maybe it's a little bit impressive. They're a little bit better at eventually, doing something. But if you saw the amount of effort they put in it, and you see the amount of neglect and things that go into, you know, doing something like that, the stuff that they can't do because they're, spending all this time, an excessive amount of time trying to put a ball through a basket from the top of a building. But when the shot happens and you see that 10-second clip and they're screaming and, shouting and, let's go, fucking all that shit. But if you see the amount of time and energy goes into it, you go, of course they can fucking do that. Right? If you spend time with one of these great athletes and you saw their routine, and you spent a day with them or multiple days and and you saw the x-rays of the damage that's being done to their bodies and things like that, you'd be like, oh, it's not impressive at all, right? I mean, it's still a little bit impressive, but it's not nearly impressive if you see the amount of energy. Like it's, almost like a mental illness, like you shouldn't be spending that much time doing something like that. You're an adult and you're putting all your energy into a game, right? Greatness is really illusionary. And then, you hear it from the kids of the great people. And they're, yeah, like I saw my dad once a week, and my parents were married, like they, become something where there's all these other things being neglected. You're not living a balanced life. You're taking too much of your time and energy and putting into a craft and a skill that really isn't, there's nothing that great about it. It's not something that's, benefiting humanity. It's more of an entertainment distraction type thing. So, I was thinking about that with the stuff I do here, because people are impressed. They'll be impressed with what I'm saying here, right? Because, they're just new ideas. I have things on this channel that are kind of unique, and, it seems like I'm whatever people would think about me and my ability to understand things. And, I have, a high IQ, whatever I've talked about that in the past. And some abilities, being dyslexic, which is pattern recognition, being introverted. I have a different kind of personality, different learning style, different way of perceiving things, pattern recognition. So, there's things that are natural abilities. But then there's the amount of meditation. I did the calculation maybe 6 months ago where I realized I've meditated since 1993. And also, I would read spiritual books. I would read the literature, and then I would just think about the things. Like after the meditation, like information would just come to me because that's what happens when you open up a doorway between you and the divine. When you open up a dialogue between you and your soul and the divinity within you, there's this free flow of information. And so I've been doing this since 1993. At least 2 hours a day, really kind of more, probably like 4 hours a day. The meditation is whatever it is, different periods where I'd meditate more. But I've put in, 20,000 hours, 25,000 hours or something it is, probably even more than that, into practicing this. It's a spiritual practice. The Sajmark system is a practice. It's a method, and you meditate an hour in the morning. You do a half hour of cleaning at night where you clean away the day's impressions, and you do 15 minutes of prayer at 9 p.m. and another 5 or 10 minutes of prayer before going to bed. So it's like an hour and 45 minutes a day. And then there would be group meditation and individual sittings. And if you're a preceptor, you would give these sittings. And so, those were half hour or an hour, 40 minutes or whatever. Depending on, when there's a gathering, there'd be multiple meditations, 3 group meditations a day. And then there was the time you would think about it and write in your diary and reflect and, get into a reflective mood, where you'd ruminate over things, which is, kind of a form of active meditation, going on walks and information coming to you, thinking about things, right? Thinking about, the world. And I spend a lot of time doing that now. A lot of the time I spend is alone. I walk around with the dogs, during my days here. And, and this is where all this information comes from. And so people who are impressed by what I say here, the amount of time and effort that I've put into, cultivating a relationship with the divine and doing all these types of things. And I'm not, I'm kind of a slacker. Like I've put in the work. Like I put in, above average for people who do the meditation compared to other people who do the meditation. I've put a lot more effort and energy into it. And, I had some capacity coming in. I had some spiritual tendencies, some past lives or whatever, doing these things. And so that also plays into it. But, you're ultimately just trying to be a conduit. You're trying to remove your ego, your own personality, not your personality, but because there's always going to be your essence, and you're going to have your, whatever it is, your configuration that makes up your personality, your individuality, whatever that is, right? But you're trying to minimize that part. You're minimizing you because you're limited as an ego, as a person. And when you become a conduit, like, pipe, like a faucet, and you're working to maximize the amount of flow of energy, the transmission, the Pranhuiti that comes through you, and then the information that comes from the source. The better stuff always comes from the divine. You can be kind of clever, you can be witty, you can have your own personality thing, but it's enhanced by this energy, and ultimately it's the energy and the information that has to flow through you. And it's taken me years to become a conduit in this way. And what I do here, and some people are impressed, a lot of people don't get it, or they don't see it, or they don't feel it, whatever. But the people who do, it's impressive to them. But like I said, it's 30,000 hours of work, and so much more than that, right? And the benefit of the transmission that you're given the Sajmark system. But the Sajmark system was always meant to be, there's people that used to meditate 18 hours a day. These are ancient yogis, and they didn't have the benefit of transmission, the cleaning. People who do the yogic postures, and the yogic postures originally came from these guys' bodies would start to atrophy because they weren't using them. And, to do that, they needed to have underlings cook their food. Like you'd have to come in, work your way up to the meditative thing, because you had people come in and have to, do the lower level work, and they would come in. There's the 8 limbs of Patanjali's yoga, where they would come in and do the basic, scrub the floors, scrub the toilets, clean the food, peel the potatoes, that shit. and they do that for 10 years, and then they would move up to the next phase of this, this system, and eventually they wouldn't do any work at all. They would just meditate, right? They would, you remember there's a story of Buddha Siddhartha. He was a prince. He saw went into, he was prevented from seeing all the shit. He was living a dream life as a prince in India, and he was prevented by his parents from seeing all the negative things in the kingdom. And one day he went for a walk. He saw a dead body. He saw, filth and poverty, and he was like, "Wow, this is horrible." And so he left his princehood. He went under a Budhi tree, a Bodhi tree, and he meditated for years. Like just there's these stories of these people that meditated for 1,000 years, hundreds of years, right? And the Sajmark system, because of the transmission and cleaning, you get that without putting in all that time and effort. But you also get to have your life. You get to have a family. You get to have you're not running off to some ashram somewhere, some convent or whatever, some monastery where people hide away from life. You go out and you interact with people. You have a normal life. You do things. You have complete life, like a normal life, which people don't value because they compare your normal boring life to other people who achieve greatness, because they'll put all their energy and time into a singular activity. And of course it's impressive, because the human beings have the capacity to manifest things and do great things. But what's considered greatness is when people go out, are great at one thing. There's this woman, she's called the Red Panda or something like that, I think. And she rides a unicycle. She's like a 50-year-old Asian woman. She rides, I think she's Chinese. And she rides a unicycle, and she flips fucking dishes on top of her head, right? And they do this at halftime. You see these Cirque du Soleil people that do amazing tricks. But if you saw the amount of time it takes into mastering something like that, I bought a unicycle when I was like in high school, and I rode it around the neighborhood, and I never got really good at it where I could ride it, confidently, and I practiced at it. I was able to, I not certainly master it, but I was able to ride it. But to do something where I would throw plates on top of my head, like it wasn't even, it wasn't even close. And I know how hard it is to ride a unicycle. Like you can never stop pedaling. You're either going forward or backwards. There's these circus where these guys would play basketball on unicycles. So it was an act. And, it was amazing. Some of these unicycles were really tall, right? And they had this whole thing that they would do when they would go to these halftime shows. And, to do this skill, which was impressive, the amount of time and energy that you'd put into it, like I said. So, what's being neglected? What part of your life aren't you able to participate in because you're spending energy and time on this one specific thing? And the Sajmarg system of meditation is, designed so that you can live a normal life and have all these other things, but then also have a spiritual life. Because, when I was talking about that, period of time in your life between the ages of 20 and 50, and then your body starts to deteriorate, right? And, you spend so much time at your job. Like, so you sleep a third of your time, right? A third of your time is just sleep. And then you have your job, which takes up a third of your time or more, depending on your hours, if you have a full-time job. And then what's left over, right? Like you have to cook meals, you have to do all these things, and you have to learn to do like primary labor, clean your house, cook your food, these things. It's just things that you have to do. And then if you have kids and pets, and, they all need time and attention, they need you, all this stuff, and your, spouse, and your extended family, and you're just like, when you're at your peak of your energy, you're a full-grown adult who can, have the capacity to do work and all these things. You're spread too thin, and there's no time to think about God. There's no time to reflect on your soul, right? But the Sajmark system has made this, this practice that could be done in, a short period of time. During, you wake up in the morning, you meditate before you get going on everything in your life. You can adjust the amount of time you spend on it based on your day, but you do the meditation, and you start your day connected to divinity, and then you're thinking about God while you do your activities. There's this practice of constant remembrance, thinking about God throughout the day. Like God is performing your tasks and not you. And there's a flow to it, like this flow sets in, and things start to flow together. And then, as do these other things. You're done with your work for the day. You do this cleaning, and then before going to sleep, you meditate. 9 p.m. You say this prayer for everybody. And so there's this time that you kind of eke out, and you start practicing your spiritual life, even in the chaos is that the overwhelm that you suffer, the stress and all these things that you're dealing with because of your daily activities. And there's a greatness in there because you're able to be a complete person. You're able to have a full life with all the things that make up a full life. All the milestones and things, all the things boxes you have to tick off to experience life at its fullest. And you also are able to have a deep relationship with God. And as that relationship deepens and you work and you serve God, and whatever amount of effort you put into there, you're going to develop something, and you're going to develop the capacity to have God flow through you, have divinity flow through you. And this is what happens here for me because of the time and energy that I've put into it, right? And that it's not as impressive for people when they realize that this is 30 years of work and hours of all these activities, that connecting with divinity whilst doing, these normal mundane activities, right? But ultimately, like greatness, I don't like the word great because there's an arrogance to it. It's like you're better than other people, like this thing. But, in terms of achievement, life achievement, the real achievement is what you have inside. It's not trophies. It's not, money. It's not success. It's not fame. It's not, those things are achievements in the material world, but true achievement is something different. Like true achievement is what you become on the inside. Like your soul had goals for your life before your life begins. God and your soul have goals for you, things that you're supposed to achieve. And most people like fall off that path. They lose sight of what their purpose is here. And then they get sucked into the materialistic world and they don't achieve any of those goals. And so true greatness is measured by what you have inside, and you can see it in people. Like you can feel their connection to divinity, their evolution, their consciousness raising, and their ability to go to another level. And it's devalued because people have to look for it, and it isn't like explosive. It isn't some kind of, everything's so degraded. Like people have very limited attention spans, and they need to be stimulated. These young people and the internet and all these things, they need these hits of dopamine and all the stuff that goes with exciting and interesting, or things that are more they're not subtle, right? But true greatness, true evolution is subtle. God is subtle, right? You become more subtle. You're not bam, you're not kaboom. There's no kaboom in spirituality. Like I say, those things, kaboom, kablamo. What do I say? Kaboom, kablamo, kablawi. You always say that, right? When Batman used to fight in these old goofy Batman show, and it would be bah, pow, and these things with a big comic book. But people like explosive things. They like big things. They like drama. They like, things that are, shocking to the system, adrenaline rush, fight or flight type stuff, right? People want to jump, do bungee jumping and do all these things, thrill seeking, adrenaline junkies. But, the true evolution, what should be valued is, putting in the work and the mundane things with a, idea of service to God and doing it for God and connecting to God and feeling the energy, divine energy. And, it's a very subtle thing. And, material greatness in any, you become an artist and you in your field, in your art, it's it's something that can be considered remarkable, and there's an achievement there, but it's an overall failure of your true purpose here, to be a complete human being serving God, and having gifts that are connected to the divinity within you, who are maximized by this flow of energy. So anyways, those were my thoughts about this. Let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, today's Monday, August 10th. Did a long voiceover, which you've just listened to, or not, from about practice, and I did a long voiceover in my last video that went up this morning. This video is going up tomorrow, and also there's both of those things. I want to tell a story that sort of combines the two. One was about practicing, and the other one was about how I connect to God, and how you can become a conduit for God. And also about avocado oil and some bullshit about that my wife and I just figured out that sucks. Um, people who are trying to eat avocado oil or some other oil that's not, um, you know, toxic seed oil. So, anyways, what I was going to include in the when I originally thought about this thing about practice, there was a story I was going to include, and hopefully I can and do the accent. And when I first like information, I don't know how to, inspirational information is the way I would put it, where something is coming to you, like there's information being sent to you, and in the Sajmark system with the Whispers of the Brighter World and this medium, and Babaji, the second master of the system, got all of his knowledge from intercommuning. Like he quit school when he was in eighth grade. Like I don't know what the equivalent of that was in India at the time. He was educated, like he was, you know, um, he was a smart person, but he wanted to have original thought. So he stopped reading books from other people. He stopped education, and he was, you know, um, doing his getting his information from the source, even at a young age. And then as he progressed as a spiritual person, he was able to intercommune with these higher developed souls. He had conversations with all the famous, souls out there, the people who had come before, the soul of the people that had come and done spiritual work before. I mean, just so many of them. And of course, his spiritual master, Lalaji. And so intercommuning is a big part of it. And he says in the Whispers of the Brighter World over and over again that information always comes, like inventions and things are always coming from above or within. That higher developed souls are surrounding you, and people who have inventions and something like the Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's all channeled. There's this flow of information. Whatever it is, like people might be thinking they're having these ideas, and it's true they are, but the ideas are coming from an etheric being. Some higher developed soul, usually working for God, maybe some lower developed soul in some cases, but human beings don't have that much in terms of original thinking. There is, critical thinking is, there, it can be, skills can be developed, but in terms of this kind of inspirational information, it's always coming from the source, which, should humble human beings, and, but they will, people won't admit it, right? People like want to, believe their ideas are their own and these things, Information's such a big thing now. We think about all the spying and how it's been monetized and the way people think about information, but the best stuff comes from higher developed souls that are intercommuning, and human beings are given inventions and things when they're ready to handle it. And if you're a person, and there's probably multiple people that have the opportunity to be a channel for that stuff. And so whenever I have these like inspirational ideas of like this whole thing about practice, there's a lot of things that will sort of you're interpreting like a um, etheric energetic message that isn't based in language. That we have the way that we think is in our particular language, and then we have to run it through your personality. So within this stuff comes through to you, it's they're running it through a particular personality, and you're going to put your own little spin on it, your own, the way that you see it, because you're especially if it's something like just ideas, like if it's an invention that's something different, but you're going to get the information, and then it's going to be channeled into your language and into your into the way that you see things. It's going to go through the lens in which you see the world. You're going to have some influence on it. And so, like, there was this stuff I'm thinking about practice and all these things, and then there'd just be like this, the night before I do the voiceover, if I'm too tired to do it, it's best if like I'm walking around the pasture and I come right in and I just do it, or it's happening in real time, and I'm just these ideas are there. But sometimes when I think it over for a while, like you'll be, the way that I will put the ideas, there might be 10 different like examples or things that are a part of the what I'm saying, and how do I put what where, right? Like how do I make it more understandable to people, like how what's the best way to frame it and put the various elements together. So it takes some work to learn to do that and do it effectively and be able to communicate stuff to people. And one of the stories, I was thinking about practice when I was, I don't know, I would say 7 or 8 years old. My you had to take a musical instrument in my elementary school. Every kid had to have an instrument, and I wanted to play, I believe, the saxophone. Yeah, it was the saxophone. And there was a couple instruments I was interested in playing. But my brother had played the clarinet. So I played the clarinet, right? Because we had one. My brother's old clarinet. It was in a beat up old box. My brother later would tell me a story where he was in a band, and you had, in a clarinet, it's like a wooden instrument, and it has what they call a reed. There's various instruments that have this reed. And it's a thin piece of wood, like white wood, very soft wood, maybe, not balsa wood, but something soft. They don't last forever, and they're right there in the mouthpiece of the instrument. And you would eventually get soaked and it would wear away, and you always have to have one. And my brother shows up to a performance, and he doesn't have a reed. And so he's in the band and he's playing. And his teacher comes up to him, and and without the reed, it doesn't make any sound, so he's just pretending to play. And his teacher comes up to him and said, "I've never heard you sound better." And so, but anyways, I played the clarinet, and I didn't really like it. I learned a little bit of it, and and then I don't know what happened. One sister wrote songs and played the guitar. My sister, who was closest to me in age, she was in high school when I was in elementary school, and I think my other sister played a little bit of guitar. She was sort of a hippie, my oldest sister. Not sure all the how this came about, but my mom decided to get me guitar lessons, and I kind of was into it, but I had this Italian teacher, like real Italian, and I'm a quarter Sicilian. I'm German, Irish, Albanian, and Sicilian. My last name is Sicilian Romano. And, for the life of me, I can't do a Italian accent. Like, occasionally I can, but not really. And I grew up with, I had Italian people, and, there was some Italian influence. My dad, was half Italian, but whatever. But I'm going to do my bad Italian accent now. And, like, he's there, and I would go to the lesson, and he would teach me stuff, and I would almost immediately forget it, and I would go home, and I wouldn't do anything with the guitar. And the guy says to my mom, "Mrs. Romano, Mrs. Romano, your son, you have to practice, right? Practice, no way." And because I obviously wasn't practicing, and so I think I took these lessons for a year. But if you don't practice, you don't get better. And I knew as a kid, like that was a thing. Like you had to, you had to invest in something. And not that I didn't want to practice. I think probably I didn't understand what he's teaching me, and I wasn't really into the guitar. I was, and I would just come home from school and go play sports with my friends, and there was no time. Next thing I know, I'd be at a lesson, right? Like just, there a lot of your life as a kid, you're just you walk to school, you go to school, take a bus, you walk, you come home, and then, you're just, I mean, we had like lots of free time where we were just on our own, and you had to be home by a certain time by dinner, and like most kids were all, if you didn't think about it, your friends would be like, "I gotta go home for dinner," so you would just go home because everyone else did. But, you're going around and you're really not sure what's happening. Like you just, my mom would say, "Hey, today's guitar lessons." I'm like, "All right, let's go," whatever. So, but anyways, going back to the stuff I was talking about into my last video. Somebody asked how how God communicates with me. I don't know the exact phraseology of it. In what form does God, and there's never a form. So going back to what I was saying, when, God is subtle and God is energetic, you can get very heavy, grossness. I mean, there's no sins in Mark. I guess ingratitude would be considered maybe the only sin, but that it's called spiritual grossness. Like anything blocking your spiritual path is spiritual grossness. All the impressions you get, what they call samskaras in Sanskrit, that you form these impressions, and these impressions, these materialistic things that stick to you. These are impressions that you're going to take with you when you die. They become energetic in nature. They become, some level of, heaviness that you have, and things that you have to now deal with in your next life. Like you're leaving, and these are unresolved impressions that have to be accounted for. If it's an addiction, it's an addiction, something like that. It might be some good things that you've accumulated, and you go into your next life with some capital, right? Some abilities, at least on the material level. So there are things that you take with you. Some scars are things you take with you, with your soul when you die, and they have, they prevent you from graduating from planet Earth too. That's the other thing, because like in Sajamar, which is different, you're not trying to become something, right? You're unbecoming. You're becoming. You're undoing, right? Like instead of, having all these accomplishments and all these material things that that define you. Oh, I'm a father. I'm an inventor. I'm a billionaire. I'm a, whatever it might be, right? Like the things that you get rid of all those things where you're nothing. Like you have to become like nothing and subtle. And so instead of working, and you can be an accomplished person, but you just have to detach yourself from your accomplishments. You've got to detach yourself from all these things. That they're not, they're light, like they're you don't, they're not you, they're roles that you're playing, like, and, there's something that, you're a soul, and your soul is, with God, God is contributing, and you're doing these things together. And when you think about, you're in this state of constant remembrance, which is a thing that you do, a practice. It's a trademarked practice in the Sajmark system, where you think God is doing everything with you. And when you think that way, where you're like, God is making this video, God is, breathing, God, you're like, everything that you're doing is, you have this idea that God is the one doing it, and you're just kind of an observer. You're just there. And so then you don't get, you don't beat yourself up when you fail. You don't pat yourself on the back when you succeed. It's not you. It's divinity. Like everything is God. And you're just, an observer. You're a participant with God, or you're doing it in partnership. And if you do that, then these impressions don't stick. You don't have impressions because everything's light. And, you're just, but you have to get into a state of being where the grossness, where you're minimizing the grossness, you have a good spiritual condition. You have to make yourself subtle. And the more you can do that, the easier it is to communicate with God, because you're reaching up to a different level, beyond your language, beyond your materialistic things. And everyone has to learn to do that at some point in their existence. And, it's, when I was, I had an operation, and they put me on OxyContin, and I couldn't meditate, and my video sucked, and it was just like I felt disconnected, and because it's just, it's just a powerful drug, and and I just all kinds of physical issues. It just sucked, and because it's not subtle. It's like whatever vibrations are there, and it basically blocks you from connecting to God, and you can't. And these things. So like there's times you'll feel grosser, you'll be, and lower level emotions, and when you get freaked out, or you get angry, you get hateful, you get in a negative state, or you're around other people who are gross too. That could be another thing. You're around people who aren't subtle. You're around people who have bad vibrations, and you can't really connect to God because they're gross. There was a time, Master Charji was being trained by Babaji. The third master was being trained by the second one. And he was, there was two things that happened. One, like Master Charji was a perfectionist, and he was doing the practice very in a disciplined way. Like just, he was very meticulous, and, he was a person that strives for excellence. And Babaji said, I got to clean something out of you. And he got kind of perturbed that there was something there. He goes, you're giving me sittings and I'm doing my practice. Why is there anything to clean? And he goes, well, some of the deepest grossness like falls, like you have stuff at the top of the pool, right? Like if you're cleaning a pool and you use a skimmer and you get the stuff off at the top of the pool. But the heaviest stuff falls to the bottom, and that's a lot harder to get out of the pool, right? So, the worst impressions come up later. You have these buried things from maybe past life or whatever. And he explained that to Chargy, and then he said, but I think this is, he said, this is from your dad. Like you inherited this, this stuff that, whatever he's cleaning out. And, so there was that. And Chargy, kept a account of these things in his diary. Another time, he asked Chargy how his meditation was. It was group meditation because I was so restless and I couldn't meditate at all. And, when you become a higher developed, so you get higher developed, and the higher you go, the deeper you go into your spiritual self, the more the grossness affects you if you have a little bit. Chargy said he hated this guy at work, and Babji said, it'll contaminate your whole system because your system becomes a vacuum for God. Like if you're really, doing this, you're doing the meditation in a, you've moved up, and the higher you go, the more you advance, the more your system becomes like a vacuum. So if you get angry thoughts or gross thoughts, it contaminates your whole system, which is kind of a bummer. It's why higher developed souls often fall, because you really have to be disciplined. And so, he said you have to throw this hatred out of your system and not let your mind indulge in things like that. You have to discipline your thoughts, like you have to, whatever. So he said, but he was getting this sitting in a group meditation, and he said, I didn't feel anything. I felt gross. He goes, yeah, you were sitting next to this guy, and this guy, I can't clean this guy. He's so gross, I can't clean him. And you were sitting next to him, and because of that, he negatively affected you. So there's all these things, right? And sometimes you're in a place like, chaotic place, a gross place, and it's hard to feel God, right? Like a place where there's, a place of ill repute, or just somebody. You have these houses that are just loud TV houses and things, where there's just, all these devices on, and people are all, negative, a lot of fights and anger. And it's the atmosphere is contaminated with that shit. It's hard to feel God. So there's a lot of things that go into, it's a lot of work that goes into, being able to channel and being able to get inspirational stuff from, from divinity. You have to have a good atmosphere. You have to make your, your place, your house like an ashram where there's good atmosphere and there's all these other things. And so just basically briefly, because it's a long introduction now, like two voiceovers. My wife sent me this thing yesterday that this siete, this is a famous, they make chips and, all these various snacks and things, and they're using avocado oil. And they got bought by Pepsi, and they were tested, and like 88% of their products have shitty oil in them. And, I asked ChatGPT or whatever it was, Google Gemini, I think, was it? I don't know if I have it up here. I think it's yeah, I don't have it. It was on my phone. And Google Gemini said, well, it might not be Siete's fault. They could just be buying contaminated avocado oil. And then it said, we can tell you which snacks do have it. And I have that. I sent it to my wife, but it was ones I had never heard of. And these are companies that test their own snacks. So my wife just sent me something this morning. She was up before me, and it said that most of the avocado oil you buy isn't real avocado oil. And so people are so many people are now trying to not eat, these seed oils. And we were doing a good job not eating them, but we were eating these things that had, seed oils in them, even though they said they were. So these companies get bought by these big food companies like Pepsi or whatever it is. And then, of course, they're going to try to cheapen the ingredients and, get shit that's whatever. You get the idea. And so everything's fucked. Like, it's a real bummer. Like, I mean, you can even read the ingredients. I've made a video about how exhausting it is to read the ingredients of everything. And this goes to everything I was saying in these voiceovers. The world is so gross and contaminated, it's hard to, I mean, you can't trust anything, and just, you have to almost, grow everything and make your own shit, whatever it might be. Make your own chips and, use avocado oil, and which you can do. You can learn to do that stuff, but it's just so time consuming. And even then, like you'd have to make sure that the avocado oil you're getting is actual avocado oil, or you have to press the oil yourself and make it. Or, you can use, there's other oils you can use, but, I knew this about olive oil. Like, a lot of olive oil wasn't really olive oil. That was the whole fucking thing. You had to find stuff that was actually olive oil, and things say they're organic and they're not. There's just, I mean, it's just a world of shit. All right, let's move on to the other stuff here. Okay, so this is Chris Christie. Him and Donald Trump used to be friends, like real, friends. Donald Trump doesn't keep friends. And then he helped Donald Trump prep for debate against Joe Biden in the 2020 election. And Trump gave everybody COVID. Like, he had COVID, and they went in, and he gave Chris Christie COVID, and Chris Christie is in the high-risk category. He's morbidly obese. And Trump called up and said, please don't tell anybody I had COVID. And then Trump went around telling everyone he got it from Chris Christie. And so they had a falling out, and Chris Christie was very hard on Trump when he ran for president in 2020, whatever it was, the 24. They had all these, whatever those candidates were, DeSantis and Nikki Haley and all those, losers. But then Trump went in on him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner for no reason. Just started calling Chris Christie fat. And Chris Christie hadn't, wasn't in the news. But he was on ABC News, and I watched Morning Joe this morning, and they were featuring this clip. And he says this.
This week when the Iranians put out their list of demands to reopen the strait, reparations, etc. What struck me was that Donald Trump is about to become what he never, ever wanted to be, Jimmy Carter.
Boom. All right, so he's being, here.
Yes. He is being held hostage by Iran. They are holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage. As a result, they're holding the world economy hostage, and it's focused at Donald Trump. And I know from talking.
So I was watching CNN. I think it was Fareed Zakaria's show, I believe, on Saturday, and I meant to mention this in a video. I was going to find the clip, but he had somebody on there, and apparently Iran is now saying they want control of the Strait of Hormuz moving forward. So they didn't have it before the war, and now they want control over it. And they're going to tax, because they have this very narrow opening, and there's all these ships that have to pass through, and they can collect, inconsequential money to the companies that have to pay them, and they're going to be in charge of it. They're going to, be, they're going to own it. They're going to pay, they're going to pay a toll on it, and that's now going to happen because of Trump's bullshit war. I mean, this is one of the things that's like they believe that. That Trump is at their mercy, right? Like, this is fucking horrible for Trump. Like, maybe he'll get some bullshit, promise from them that they won't have a nuclear weapon, like Barack Obama. It's a deal that he criticizes, and he'll claim victory like he always does. But it's going to be worse there. And the guest was talking about how, there are these countries there that, like you go, and if you've ever been through there, I've gone to India, I've gone through some of these countries. And the airports are fucking amazing, right? When I first went to India years ago, I went through Singapore Airlines, which was the most luxurious thing I've ever experienced. And, I wasn't even in first class, but it was crazy. And we got to the airport, and the airport had a science museum in it. I had a 6-hour layover. And it was a spectacular airport. I'm like, Americans' airports suck. Right? And then, a lot of the American airports are dirty and run down and old and outdated. And they got these amazing airports. I mean, just with stores, like restaurants and fucking, they're like spectacular malls, the nicest mall you've ever been in. And, some of these countries, these oil-rich countries, the UAE with Dubai and these places, and they're, in a place that's very chaotic with a lot of religious bullshit and a lot of hatred and just Muslim on Muslim stuff, and certainly negativity for Jewish people in the West. These countries are like Switzerland. They're like these places people go. High-end golf tournaments. I mean, celebrities, and they're now unstable because of what's going on in the Middle East with Iran. Like these places that sort of guaranteed that they would be, neutral places where there wouldn't be any of this bullshit. And now they're completely unstabilized by all this stuff with Iran. And so, Trump has fucked it, which we all knew because that's what he does. And, he got worked in this thing by Israel. Israel wants to destabilize the whole region, this whole fucking thing. My wife and I started watching. I started watching it and then I said I didn't want it, but my wife had looked into it herself. It was about this hijacked, this bombed flight from that landed in Scotland, in Lockheed, Scotland, in 1988. At the end of Ronald Reagan's presidency, and it's this terrorist act that happened where a bomb went off over Scotland and was supposed to go. The plane got diverted. It was supposed to go over the Atlantic Ocean, and HBO's put together sort of a high-end show about it. And I didn't want to watch it because I knew that I would believe that Israel did some false flag thing, right? And I knew that they would not be saying that because it's, Netflix, right? And so whenever there's these historical shows, and I know they're going to blame some Muslim terrorist group, which in this case it ends up being Hamas, but there's a line where the CIA is talking about the theories, and some Muslim, extremist jihad groups have taken responsibility, and then, but they're just bragging. They didn't do anything. And then there's a moment where he's like, "What? Is there anything else?" He goes, "Well, we did get one, person who claimed Mossad did it." And the guy snickers and he goes, "Okay." So there's no credible threats. And it's 1988. It's not that far away from when Israel did, the attack on the USS Liberty that happened, whatever that was in the late 60s, early 70s. And so, there's been a history of Iran. But once, Israel did that, where they attacked an American vessel and then wanted America to think it was Egypt. So America would fight Egypt for them, right? So once they started pulling bullshit like that, you can never trust them again. They should come up for everything. And they do because these guys know Israel did it. And they can't say that, right? And so, so anyways, all of those things. Let's get back to this guy.
Zoom over the last 24 years. The one person he would never want to
Jimmy
be is
Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
I talked to him about Jimmy Carter
right?
too.
And
yeah.
so, and here we are, and it was all voluntary.
So, you have a
There's shit all over him. I saw Jimmy Carter. I was going to a spiritual gathering in Texas. There's a bunch of there's a guy who owned a hotel there, who was did a lot of work for the organization, volunteer stuff. Moved multiple people there. There was a lot of Indians there in Texas. And Master Chargy went to Texas, and it was like some impromptu thing. And, I went to the gathering, and I was coming back, and I got on the plane, and I was just like really, like you end up in this sort of deep, internalized state, and some gatherings more so than others, where you just want to stare at the wall. You don't want to fucking, go back to work or deal with your bullshit life, or whatever it is, right? This thing here had, down in Brazil, the Democratic Party needs two wings of the bird, which is a Sajmarg thing, a spiritual wing, and she's not saying that, but it's a famous saying. A bird needs two wings to fly, a spiritual and a material. But anyways, so I'm in the plane and I'm like sitting by myself, and I think I had an aisle seat, but there were so many people, there's so many empty seats. I just moved over. I'm in the back of the plane, and there are these big guys with those things in their ears, those whatever, and they're talking into their sleeves, and I'm not even paying attention. Like they're obviously like Secret Service agents on, and I'm like not even, I'm like I'm noticing it, but I'm like not even thinking about it, and I'm looking out the window, and somebody's standing over me, and and he goes, "Nice to meet you," and I look at him like, "Oh fuck, it's Jimmy Carter." He's got his hand out, shakes my hand, and he goes back to his seat. My mom, he was my mom's favorite president, but he got fucked on the Iran thing. And now, Trump is Jimmy Carter was a nice guy, and but kind of a patsy himself, and Trump is now he's getting punked. He's getting punked by Israel. Israel fucked him, right? So, anyways, this is the Chris Christie, going back to him.
I'm talking to him over the last 24 years.
This is like his mannerism. So I remember this character, this guy from Dances with Wolves. It's Chris Christie.
You will report to Captain Cargill at the furthermost outpost of the realm, Fort Sedgwick.
This guy gets all trigger. He's all fucking weird, this guy. At some point he says,
I'll grant you a boon. See that peasant out there? He calls himself Timmons. He's going to your Fort Sedgwick this very afternoon. You can ride.
Yeah. And it's these salutes him here. Chris Christie. And he tells the guy he peed himself, and then he shoots himself in the head. Because he's crazy. All right. Okay, so I was on my phone this morning. The video I showed you with Chris Christie. I turned on Morning Joe. I always watch the beginning of it when I eat breakfast. I'll look at the sports stuff and see if there's some big story that's out there. I have CNN there too, but I usually look at Morning Joe because it's it's more mockable. And so that video came up, but it came up without the quote from Chris Christie. They started it where Morning Joe and Mika started talking, which they always do. They never show this thing I'm looking for. They go right into their own bullshit. And so I went to search if there was any more videos up, so I didn't have to go find the Chris Christie thing, which is easy to find. It was just some ABC News thing. And then this thing popped up, and the title had the F word in it. Fucking. You're a fucking senator. Nicole Wallace exposes private Republican something or other. I don't have the rest of the title. But this is Nicole Wallace, this witch, Nicole Wallace, who used to be a Republican, used to be John McCain, used to be Sarah Palin's handler. And they stuck her in this, MSNBC thing. And she now has a podcast because they're trying to be edgy. But their podcast sucks because, this is...
Hi there, everyone. My guest this week is someone we never get enough of on the television show, so he is back for the pod. He is a one-man Ghostbusters squad in the fight to save our democracy.
Oh, yeah, I bet he's really fucking awesome. All right, so I found where she says the fucking part. She's here. Let's go to it.
And this switch flipped, and I was like, "What do you mean good for me?"
Let's go back a little bit.
And I covered these guys, and I had on Signal and WhatsApp all manner of Republican senators who would text me and say, "Keep swinging away, way to go, I'm good for you." And this switch flipped, and I was like, "What do you mean good for me? You're you go to their camera, you can't go to the bathroom without walking by a camera. What do you mean good for me? I'm a cable host on MSNBC. You're a fucking senator." And that was when
boom! Look at her bringing the fucking swear words. Look at her bring the F word.
And it happened again after Charlottesville, and then it happened again. I remember when Jim Mattis quit for cause. And I got another flurry of no's because Republicans really felt like Mattis and Kelly were really sort of holding the...
All right, so this is their podcast. Like I said, they're trying to be authentic, but they can't because they can't talk about shit that they know. All these people know Israel is running America. They know, because if we know, they know, right? I mean, they get dumb fucks like Don Lemons that they don't bring in on the fucking joke, the butt of the joke. But the rest of these people, they know what's going on. They know they're fucking lying to the American people. They, to whatever extent. They have, some people are. It depends on, how they can... live in this duality, but they can't be authentic and sincere, right? They can't, tell the American people the truth that they know because they're not supposed to do that. And so they go on these podcasts. She's got 9,000 views which it's probably inflated. And it doesn't work because what makes a podcast good is people can be sincere and authentic, right? And even to the extent, like, I was talking about how there's going to be no backlash for me when I see Erica Kirk be a cunt on the first day. And I'm like, who is this, right? And I can immediately call bullshit on her. Because nobody cares what I say. I got a small YouTube channel. There's nobody here. Some fucking dumb fuck Republicans that show up or some shills or whatever. But when I say it, I have a small audience. And, it's what I do here. And, I make things funny, whatever it might be. But I can say Erica Kirk's a fraud. But Candace Owens, who knew before I did, because, she knew Erica Kirk 4 years ago. And Erica Kirk kicked her to the curb, or had Charlie kick her to the curb. So she hates Erica. It was very clear from the beginning she and Erica don't have a relationship. And then it came out slowly that Candace Owens do. But it took her 4 months to go. Erica Kirk was always her real target. But she couldn't get there because, people would have lost their shit if they, somebody, like is a Republican and friends with Charlie goes after the widow on day one, right? And so there's, even within the alternative media community, there's people out there who, there's different levels to it. Like people who can tell you the truth on day one, people who have to wait till it's safe to tell the truth, right? And then even then they don't do it. But someone like Nicole Wallace can't even get there. So, they all might have the same kind of platform, but it's different. It's different for each, person, and it depends on who you are as a person as well, your ability to see and articulate the truth. All right, but she's dropping the F word. I found the Free Zakaria thing. I think it's worth listening to, so we'll go back to that in a second. But this is from whatever it was, election time. He said turning point action. We've seen this before, but it just happened to be on Twitter when I opened it up. And I had a different reaction. Yeah, I've seen this numerous times, but here.
You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
What?
I love you. Get out.
So why did you...
I'm not Christian.
I'm not Christian. Then what are you? Are you an atheist? Are you an agnostic? Are you a Jew? Are you are you a Muslim? Are you a Hindu? What do you do? What's your belief in God, right? Like, if you're not a Christian, like every president has been a Christian. So this is the first non-Christian president. Like you just said, I'm not a Christian, which we know he's not. Like Tucker Carlson said this. He clearly isn't. So if you're not a Christian, he said his Bible's his favorite book. Can't quote anything from it. He wouldn't put his hand on it when he swore in. So he's not a Christian. But then if you're not a Christian, do you not believe in God? Do you believe you're God? Are you trying to start your own religion where you're God? What is it? What do you believe? Like, this is a big thing. And it should have been, like, how the fuck do these extremely right-wing dumb fuck Christians vote for this guy? He said he's not a fucking Christian at Turning Point U.S. fucking gay. When Charlie Kirk was alive, Turning Point Action, and Charlie Kirk accepted this. The guy getting up and saying, I'm not a Christian, but vote for me, right? Kamala Harris was saying she was a Christian, and she grew up with a Indian mom, right? So she even was saying she was Christian. They all do. It's a lie. None of them are really religious. I mean, maybe a few of the presidents are, but most of them aren't, especially recent ones. They really can't be in politics and be religious like you fucking have an aneurysm if you had a conscience and all that shit. But, like, what are you? If you're not a Christian, what are you? Donald Trump said he's not a Christian, so what is he? What does he believe about God? Donald Trump has not stated that he is not a Christian. Rather, he publicly identifies as a non-denominational Christian, having previously identified as a Presbyterian, while belief audio clips or rumors have occasionally led to misunderstandings online. He has consistently described himself as a believer in God, which we know he doesn't, right? Self-identification, he stated, remember when Barack Obama had the shitty pastor who said some racially charged things, and he had to disavow the pastor? Like, they have to choose their pastor in their church as a whole fucking thing, performative. And Trump has no pastor, no church, hasn't read the fucking Bible, right? And like these dumb fucks, I mean, the most evangelical people are voting for this piece of shit, and they know he's not a Christian. They still vote for him. He stated that he considers himself a non-denominational Christian, shifting away from his childhood and adult bringing as the Presbyterian Church. He was raised and confirmed in Presbyterian Church and attended Marble Collegiate Church, which was influenced by positive thinking teachings of Norman Vincent Peale. Beliefs about God. Belief in God. Trump briefly affirms that he believes in God and often speaks about prayer and divine protection, notably pointing to surviving assassination attempts. Views on forgiveness. Unlike traditional Christian theology regarding repentance, Trump has publicly expressed that he refers to make things right. Political and cultural alliance. He maintains strong political and personal ties with conservative evangelical church leaders and voters, frequently championing policies. We know that. So I said, he says it here. During the July 2024 speech, Trump stated, I am a Christian at the Belief Summit, though rapid speech led to misinterpretations of the phrase, I am not Christian. It says it right there, he's not a Christian. This is fucking, I sent this one on YouTube.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
He said, I'm not Christian. And even their interpretation, it says, I'm not Christian. This is YouTube's interpretation. Google Gemini, you have to send YouTube video. So I had to find this YouTube video. He said, I'm not Christian. Nobody manipulated that. So there's that. So, you have to send a YouTube video into Gemini because it won't read Twitter videos. But it's clearly saying that, right? How he's not a Christian. Like, there's nothing that he does that would indicate he believes in God. And he lies about fucking everything. Okay, so my wife and I had somewhere to go. It's still Monday, August 10th here. And, we had a car thing and we had to wait there for a little bit. And, we were sitting there and I started going through YouTube and then I started to go through Twitter and I found amazing tweets. And I'm sending a bunch of these to my wife because that way I can have, some of them I would send to her anyway. And then some of them were for me to use here in this video, which we'll get into in a moment. I got a few more things to get to. But I came home and I did something outside, went for a walk with the dogs. And we had to kind of rush out, and I was in the middle of doing a search where AI was talking about this bullshit with Trump, right? This whole, and I left a comment about how, the YouTube video itself, Trump's clearly saying he's not a Christian. And, if he was saying, I am a Christian, then why would he have to say that if he was, right? But, he wasn't. But anyways, he's clearly not. And, Tucker Carlson said he was around him, and everyone knows, even his evangelical people, they just think that he's going to do things for them. And why would he, right? Like, if he was a legitimate Christian, it would be a test. I mean, all these legitimate Christians who go to church and actually some part of them believes in the Christian, or whatever religion it is, any leader, but here in America, being a Christian, and they believe in their religion, and they believe in some of these morals and values, they get tested as soon as they go to Washington, D.C., and so, but Trump doesn't have any of that. Trump uses people. Trump does not give a shit about anybody. And to think that just because you did something for him, he's going to stay loyal to you, it's like, there's zero evidence of that. In fact, all the evidence shows that's exactly not what's going to happen. But for whatever reason, Gemini really wants to believe that Trump is a legitimate Christian because, I can't convince it otherwise. And even though they try to keep you happy, and I wouldn't be happy if Gemini admitted that whatever, it's still trying to say, Trump, well, this is what he says. I'm like, Jesus Christ, okay. How much you guys own? And so I took this long nap. Whenever I start to edit. And when I take my cold bath especially, I'll take my cold bath around 2 and I go out and do some work. And I just couldn't wake up. This happened to me more and more. And, I'm just sitting there groggy. And, I'm awake, but I don't want to go back to sleep because I know that these are the kind of things where I get a migraine where I stay in this kind of suspended animation state. You know, it's almost like meditative state, but not really, and I'm sleepy. And then, you know, but occasionally I'm taking these naps, and they're either a lot longer than they usually are, and I just can't get up. I can't move. And then, YouTube sent me a comment here. Let me see if I can find it as I scroll through. Here it is. So, you know, when YouTube sends me these comments on my phone, like I get one out of, I don't know, 25, 50 comments. And, you know, I get about 5 a day. And I looked at my phone to see what time it was. And this comment was there. I'm 61. I just lost my corporate job. Keep the videos coming. They're keeping me sane. They keep me sane. You know, and I was thinking about this because we're in a time where everyone's going to need to adapt. Like we've reached a time where, you know, we have no idea the effects of AI and robot technology on the workforce. And then, you know, what happens with the economy and the food system. You know, this idea that you're, like, you know, I mean, when my wife and I discovered that seed oils, which I think we always knew, were really bad for you. And, you know, you see there's a lot of organic foods and they have seed oil in them. And, you know, all these organic chip companies and things like that use them. And they're in a lot of different things, any kind of baked goods. You go to Whole Foods and, you know, canola oil, which is, you know, really could never be organic and it's not supposed to be eaten by people. And, you know, it's one of the worst things. And people are kind of aware of this. So they started putting out these avocado oil things. And I talked about this, you know, a little bit earlier. And, you know, we were happy to have avocado-based oil products. And now realizing that almost none of those things actually have avocado oil in them. You know, so it's a whole fucking another nightmare thing to deal with. You know, like, you know, another, like, level of whatever you have to do. I mean, we're going to get to the point where we're growing almost all of our food. And we're just going to eat what we grow. You know, we have enough land for, you know, various types of protein, cows, sheep, maybe, pigs possibly, you know, certainly like turkeys and, you know, guineas, and we're going to have chickens for eggs and things, you know, all these types of things. And then, you know, it's easy to grow, and we're going to have like a food forest and other stuff. But until we get to that point, we have to deal with this other bullshit. And it just gets, you know, darker and darker and harder and more, you know, I mean, it's just, even if this push for healthy foods and organic foods, the cheapest way to grow shit and make shit is to put inferior ingredients into the food and just package it as something and pretend and charge more money for it, you know, and like a luxury item. You know, like when you buy one of those Fendi, I don't know if that's the, you know, Fendi purses or whatever it is. There was some guy there, some, you know, older Jewish guy talking about, I showed a clip of this, you know, how you create this, you know, this luxury economy where people will buy luxurious items that are just cheap plastic shit oftentimes, like, you know, the designer purses and the designer stuff, watches, whatever it might be. And many of these things are made in a way that they're, you know, they're not much better than the regular stuff. In many cases, not at all. But you create shortages and you make it like some trendy thing that you got to have, and, you know, this whole thing. And a lot of these foods are becoming like that. They're just as shitty as the other foods. But, you know, because of everything being unstable, this is just like a great time to do the meditation, you know, Gratefulness meditation. I mean, for anybody, like, it's just, you know, it helps people adapt and prepare for what's coming. And, you know, not all of us are going to make it, right? You know, like there's going to be a big die-off. And so it's, you know, it's a good way to put a positive spin on your life, you know, no matter what, and, you know, move in the right direction in terms of connecting with your soul, these other things. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so I saw the end of this thing, so let's start here. It's 5 minutes, and if I need to, I'll fast forward through it.
The Gulf states are reeling. Iran, not content to hit just U.S. military bases in the region, has targeted Gulf hotels, airports, and energy infrastructure. And it says it will further escalate if Gulf leaders cannot rein in Donald Trump. The region's economic lifeline, its oil and gas exports, are squeezed in the east via Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, and in the west as Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen are striking Saudi tankers in the Red Sea.
Again, look at this tiny little area here. I mean, it's just the worst spot.
How do Gulf countries move forward? Joining me to discuss all this is Tariq Masood, the director of Harvard's Kennedy School Middle East Initiative, and Danny Sintronowicz, who served as the head of the Iran branch of Israel's military intelligence. He's now a senior researcher at the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies. Danny, let me begin with you. The impasse, before we get to the Gulf, the impasse right now seems to be basically that Iran is insisting that no matter what what the nature of the deal is, they have to have a kind of privileged control over the Strait of Hormuz. They may or may not charge, but that is their discretion.
So when I saw this, I'm like, all right, Free Zakaria is like Muslim, whatever he is. And I don't know how much better his shit is than other stuff there. But if this is the Strait of Hormuz right now, and all these ships are just fucking sitting there, then it means it's closed, right? Like America has like a couple of tankers there, a couple of warships. But they, they're not suited to patrol or police this thing. And Iran is keeping these ships from allowing these ships to go through. And there's economic issues that are happening. There's another video, maybe I'll get to that today, but the oil prices are fucked, no matter what Trump says. His poll numbers are plummeting. And, he doesn't have an answer for this, right? He's been Jimmy Cartered.
The American position is no, it has to be complete, open, free, unimpeded access. Who is going to give in here?
Farid, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, like you said, there is an impasse. But eventually, I don't think that the Iranians will forgo their control over the Hormuz Straits, even if the U.S. will escalate. So the ball is in the administration court and mainly in President Trump's decision-making process, saying that eventually he can escalate, but no one is securing the fact that Iran will capitulate, or he can eventually allow Iran some sort of a control over the straits. Definitely Iran is allowing to control at least the entrance to the straits, and this is something that Iran is aspiring to. And I think that Washington will have to decide whether to accept it and open the maritime blockade, or actually continuing pressuring Iran, knowing that Iran will retaliate. So I think in the end of the day, it's a simple choice between accepting Iranian control over the straits or escalating into a war that nobody knows how it will end, but definitely it won't bring to the Iranian capitulation.
Tariq.
So, if Iran is saying we're not going to do this, and Trump didn't want this war in the first place, the Americans don't want this war. And they certainly don't want a ground war. And fucking, Trump's getting lured into a nightmare scenario here. And everyone knows that our munitions are depleted, despite Trump lying about it. I mean, it's so fucking bad. It's just fucking horrible. And he just won't stop. He just won't stop being a fucking dumb fuck, right? And he's so stubborn and mentally ill. And but it's really embarrassing. I mean, if Iran has control over the Strait of Hormuz, and they didn't have that before, that was something like they've just won the war. Trump has lost the war. No matter what kind of bullshit deal he gets on nuclear weapons, which Iran doesn't seem really wanting to do anyway. They would, or at least they haven't done it, right? They've had all these, they could have done it, and if they're only 2 weeks away for 50 years, then they could have done it. But since they didn't do it, maybe that isn't their priority, which it isn't, and now they've become more empowered in the area, in the region, which fucks Israel, right? This is the part I saw here.
So when you look at the situation in the Gulf, you grew up in Saudi Arabia, you know it well, you've studied it all your life. They had a kind of model, which was the UAE, Qatar, increasingly the Saudis, which is sort of welcome to Dubai. You're in Switzerland. You're safe. You're secure. You can do all the business you want. How much has this war sort of rattled that whole idea?
Look, I think it's rattled it significantly. If you think about the United Arab Emirates, this was a country that, when I was living in Saudi Arabia in the mid-1980s, nobody would have predicted that this would become sort of the, emblem of openness and modernity that it has become. And, I like to say that the UAE was close to achieving escape velocity from the Middle East. It was a country that many people forgot was located in this pretty troubled region. It's a place that people thought was secure. Expats were making their lives there. And then this war reminded everybody that this region is, as one Saudi commentator recently noted, a jungle. It's a difficult place. And here's the problem. For a long time, in all of these countries, there's always been a camp of foreign policy thinkers that I would call like the American camp, the camp that believes that their future lies in closer ties with the U.S. And they would always make the argument that this is a difficult region. By bringing the U.S. in, it makes it less difficult, makes it less of a jungle. Well, this recent war, the U.S. has basically been an agent not of order, but of chaos. And so the Gulf countries find
Chaos agent.
themselves really torn between two irrational actors, right? So on the one hand, you have this irrational enemy, but on the other hand, you have an ally that also doesn't look totally rational, that on the one day says they're going to obliterate Iran, the next day says, oh, well, maybe we'll share a control of the Strait of Hormuz between Donald Trump and the mullahs. And so consequently, they are deciding that they need to make other arrangements to
which means China. All right. So, like, this is a fucking mess, right? Like, and, like, there's a lot of things that are just, there's just going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. There just needs to be a few things to push the world and, America over the edge. It's like we're teetering. I lived in a situation like this with my ex where, it just didn't seem like the situation, the family, the relationship, all of it, could take much more. And just, just like one thing, and you're just walking, you're barely walking the razor's edge. You're like, off balance, and just like this 2 mile an hour wind gust could blow you over. The whole thing will collapse like a car at house, right? Like sometimes you're in that kind of situation, maybe at work or maybe in relationships, or in this case like a global, or even in terms of America, where there's just one little, it's like a tinderbox and everything's ready to go up in flames. You're just waiting for the, and that's where we are as a country. And so, and Trump is, a chaos agent. Okay, so last night, I didn't have time to do any audio with it, but I saw on Facebook this ad, sponsored somebody paying YouTube or Facebook to promote their video. And this girl, well, let's just get into it here. It's self-explanatory. Okay, I copied the video, but the audio got fucked up. And so I found it. I found this person who is, well, she sounds like almost a southern accent, but she's really a militant Jewish person here.
Y'all remember when Schmuck Schumer referred to himself as the guardian of the Jewish people?
Schumer comes from the Hebrew word shomer.
So here he is at AIPAC, right? So she is saying that he is not Jewish enough. Her position is Chuck Schumer. What does she call him? Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Y'all remember when Schmuck Schumer referred to him?
Schmuck Schumer. She calls him Schmuck Schumer, but not because he's a shill or a piece of shit or he's a Democrat or any of these things. It's because, she's a Republican person saying this, or, this is a person who's Jewish and so militantly is pro-Israel that she thinks Chuck Schumer is not far enough.
Self as the guardian of the Jewish people.
Schumer comes from the Hebrew word shomer, which means guardian. That name was given to me for a reason. For as long as I have the privilege of serving in the Senate from New York, I will unflinchingly, unstintingly, and with all of my strength be Shomer Yisrael, a guardian of Israel.
You know what I wouldn't expect from the guardian of Israel? I wouldn't expect for him to back Abdul El-Sayed for Senate, because the guy called Israel bloodthirsty.
Yeah, which, but Chuck Schumer is as much of a shill for Israel as anybody. I mean, he was almost as much as Lindsey Graham. He's a Democrat, but in the Democratic Party they have now this problem with their base, a number of young people, which is, the demographic they're going after, is anti-Israel. Somebody sent me this thing. I'm not going to show you today, but it's the two twinks talking about a bunch of young people who watch their friends watch Charlie Kirk videos, and it's about his shooting, and they're inserting people like Epstein. I'll show you the thing on my next. I want to spend more time on it than I can today, because I have all these things to get to. But like the right wing and the left wing and the young people are they're not into Israel. They're against it, and she's Chuck Schumer is backing a guy who's the kind of one of these futures of the party over there. But Chuck Schumer's 100% pro-Israel. He's never voted against any of these wars, any of the money, any of this stuff, right? And so, if this is the kind of division, it's like the division that MAGA is having. I mean, I guess at some point the Democrats will start cannibalizing each other, like they did after, the way Kamala went after Joe Biden and Joe Biden's team went after Kamala and all that stuff. But the right wing is cannibalizing itself, and now Israel and pro-Israeli lobby is cannibalizing itself. You really need to be going after Chuck Schumer right now, right? Like, is that a wise move? And this isn't the first time Facebook. This is the second video I saw from this person. I didn't know who she was. She looks anorexic and, whatever it is. I didn't know, like, if she was some kind of AI, whatever. Like, she doesn't look human. But this was the thing I saw a couple days ago. And she was going after Schmuck Schumer and a bunch of other people then as well. Like a very militant way. Because I had watched a few, I clicked on some of these things, these pro, anti-Semitism stuff that's out there. And so whoever this girl is, somebody's paying for her, or she's paying Facebook to promote her stuff, right? These are promoted videos. These are videos that Facebook is getting paid to put on my channel. And there's been a number of these videos, or, things like, the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament being in, you can wear it in a chip, remember that shit, things like that. And since I watched all those things, a while back, every once in a while they put one of these things out there that's very militant and off-putting. Like, how is this winning anybody over, right? You're already, hemorrhaging support, and now you're going after Schumer, right?
And said that the Israeli government is just as evil as Hamas.
Yeah, they run Hamas, which is kind of a known thing now amongst many of us.
This is the guy who justified a terrorist attack on Jewish preschoolers. Yes, El Sayed actually contextualized violence against Jewish 3-year-olds. And Schumer's response to El Sayed's win, our protector. We look forward to working with Abdul, because you see, as it turns out, Schumer and the rest of the Dems will embrace literally anyone for their own pathetic political motivation. You can hate America, you can trash Israel, you can even justify attacks on Jewish preschool children.
What about, like, Iranians? Like, that's not a human being. What's happening here?
Hell, you can even threaten Chuck Schumer himself, and he will still endorse you. He'll still fundraise for you. He will still pretend that you're just a regular Democrat. This is our guardian, Jewish America. This is the Democratic Party. It is radical Islam, the DSA lunatics, and the weak old-timers like Schumer and Pelosi who are just trying to stay relevant and hold on for dear life. Schumer does have our back. He just has a knife in it.
Boom. Boom. Like, this is the division. This is, remember that actor that, he's kind of crazy actor, he was a child actor. I'll remember his name later. Don't tell me, don't care, I don't need to know. Like, I could look it up. But he had this thing, "You will not divide us." He made these, it was like performance art. And when Trump got elected in 2016, he put cameras up in Washington, D.C. and somewhere else like Colorado. It was a 24-hour camera streaming. And people were supposed to go up and say, "You will not divide us." Like, some people started pushing him when he was doing it. Remember, they got into fights? "You will not divide us." Let's go look at that. So this was Shia LaBeouf. There it is. I found it.
He will not divide us. He will not
This guy comes in. He didn't want to be like the other sheeple. He wanted to do his own sheeple thing. Shia LaBeouf scooted him out of there, which was not supposed to be the part of the bit. Like, you look a little bit divided there with this guy. This looks a little bit divisive, Shia. Shia, it looks a little bit divisive. And like, did you only allow? Was there like a measurement? You know how they put the measurement, like you can't ride this roller coaster unless you're this height. They didn't let anybody on here except for this giant girl in the back, who was above 5'6". So it got a little divisive, like they won. This is like the first or second day. This was supposed to last years. Okay, so and that wasn't the only troll that he had problems with. But you know, this was this thing that he did. And we're pretty divided. Like, it didn't work out, Shia. You gave it a good get a bunch of dopes to sit out there and yell, we will not divide us. It kind of felt like there was like, it had potential. But, you know, it didn't work out because Trump has been the most divisive figure in American politics. Okay, so going back to this person here. I guess this person has 500,000 subscribers or something like this in New York City. She's, you know. But there's this thing called the purity troll, which I don't talk about as much. And there used to be a lot of people like this in the truth community that would watch other truthers' videos and, you know, call out people who were shills. You know, this happened a lot in the QB movement, you know, the QAnon, Q-tard people. They, you know, there's, you know, people think that it's their job to keep everything pure and everyone's got to be, you know, a certain level. And, you know, there's people like this and just in general who, you know, they're worthless pieces of shit, but they got to make sure that they keep everyone up to a standard they themselves aren't able to you know, reach. And, you know, purity trolls are the worst, but they always set in when things are falling apart. And things are falling apart, right? The ship be sinking. In terms of the, you know, I mean, when you have people in the Jewish community going after Chuck Schumer, like when there was a whole fucking landslide of negative opinions about shit, right? Like, you know, he's not holding the line, then you know things are going south quickly. All right, let's get back to it here. Okay, so there's a few things I had left over from yesterday, and then the stuff I sent to my wife when we were sitting in the waiting room of the car place. Here.
Last question for you. If Democrats do take over the House, it's just going to be investigation mania. You know, they're going to do oversight. They could impeach you again. I mean, do you think they will?
Well, a lot of people are saying I'm one of the greatest presidents ever.
They're not saying that, though.
But they know, they see the results. Look.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying, you know, there's the dumb fucks who believe what you say. Right, but the evidence, you know, like, there's a few things. I'm going to move forward, but I want to come back to this, you know. Remember this, what he was saying here.
Brookfield police with guns drawn pull over a car they say was flagged by flock cameras in connection to a homicide out of Milwaukee. Well, turns out this was all some sort of mishap with the flock camera systems. In fact, Brookfield police say they called Milwaukee police and MPD said they no longer needed the car or the people inside, so officers let them go.
Holy shit! So a flock camera pulled over some people. You know, this flock camera stuff. I got another thing coming with this. You know, there's another one that was on a golf course. I'll show you that. On a golf course, but they're just getting you used to being surveilled. Like all these things, you know, the data centers, the price of gas, the stuff with Israel. Like nothing's ever going to, you know, you being mad about it and you protesting, you complaining, not just you know, everybody, the people doing that. It's just, you know, getting you used to eat more. It's getting you used to eating more shit, right? Because they're not going away. You know, they might give you some initial, oh yeah, we're getting rid of those things, or yeah, we hear you, and then they'll just be back up there, right? Like, you know, like I was saying to my wife about the avocado oil thing. If you take the people who realize that, you know, polyunsaturated fat and canola oils and these other oils are horrible for you, right? I mean, you're, you know, cancer in a box or heart disease in a box, you know, prepared foods, whatever, the stuff that you're eating, you know. And so you're like, all right, I want to do something different. And so you spend more money, you do research, and you come up with alternative foods that are, you know, marketed to you. And, you know, people who are conscious, people who are aware, people using critical thinking skills, people who are, you know, maybe a cut above the average people. And you now have you're upselling them to something that's still got the shit in it, right? Like, you know, that means the system's 100% not working anymore. I mean, in terms of like you being a consumer, there's still poison in you when, you know, the labels no longer mean anything. Well, you can't even read the ingredients. When you read the ingredients, you find out they've been lying to you. They can say it whatever on the label, and they're not being held liable because they just aren't. Trump had Chia Pet. So this thing with his hair is like, there's just so many more memes. I'm not going to show all of them. This one has a...
Introducing the Chia Pet Trump. First, soak your chia planter in water. Then prepare your chia seeds. Spread them right onto the head.
This is like from the actual commercial.
Just add water. And watch it grow. Day by day. That famous hair gets bigger and bigger. Now that is tremendous hair.
That is tremendous hair. Look at that fucking shit. That's just wonderful. Boom. All right. Chia. Okay, so here, you know, there's been signs that he's, you know, getting some kind of help with his hair, but look at how old he looks. Like he's just, you know, like his skin, you know, around his eyes, this whole fucking weird shit he does with the, you know, the tanning stuff and his weird ass neck. I mean, he's just not, you know, he's aged quite a bit.
Mr. President, the Iranian government threatened a bunch of U.S. companies today in the region, including Google, Apple.
With what? What did they threaten them with? BB guns? Or
well, that's
they don't have much left to threaten.
My question for you is, are you...
I don't know. I mean, what are they... You made a statement. What did they threaten them with? I don't know. Tell me, how did they threaten them?
Well, all I know is that they threatened them, sir.
What does that mean?
Fair enough.
They said something nasty?
Is the government in touch with these companies? Are you helping to backstop them?
You don't even know what the threat was. What was the threat? I haven't heard it. What was the threat? Did they say they're going to blow them up? They're going to hit them? They're not. You know what they're not going to do? They're not going to hit them with a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. Is it something you're concerned about, sir?
No.
Iran's IRGC issues a warning that they will target 18 U.S. technology companies if the U.S. continues targeted assassinations of Iranian leaders beginning on April 1st. Those companies include NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft.
Most of those people are dead already. Yeah, Peter?
All right, so, you know, any logical person would go like, if they're using fucking BB guns, you piece of shit, then why the fuck are they kicking your ass in the Strait of Hormuz? If you can't win in Strait of Hormuz and you can't get a deal with them, then they have a lot more than BB guns. Like, why haven't you beat them? And so, you know, there's this thing where people lie. And, you know, it's incentivizing for me to be an honest person because a couple of reasons, right? I mean, first of all, it's just what you should do. Like, there's a positive reasons. There's the higher reasons that you would not lie or not murder or not whatever. And then there's the lower reasons, like self-preservation. Like you don't want to go to prison, you don't want to go to jail, right? But for not lying, like when you lie like this, there's lies where, the truth is going to come out inevitably, right? There's lies that you can tell where the person can't prove it and nothing's going to come out, there's whatever. And those lies, at least you're going to be a little bit more less stressed. I mean, you're always going to feel guilt and shame. There's always going to be, a negative impact on you as a person when when you lie to people. And some people get off on lying, they like to lie. But the kind of lies that are time released that, inevitably it's going to come out. And it's coming out on a daily basis. So Trump either doesn't know how bad things are in Iran, which is partially true. He's convinced himself of these things. But the fact that he can't get a deal and they won't surrender, and even if he escalates the situation, they're not giving up, and he's going to have to fucking cave after. And when you have to give up the Strait of Hormuz, and you've been telling people that they just have BB guns, it's embarrassing. Of course, Trump has done this with so many different things, where inevitably the truth is going to come out, and you're going to look like a total piece of shit. And he just doesn't care because he's, living his own fucking world. His brain is melting down. But it causes you, like whether you're aware of it or not, when you don't know because you don't want to find out, like if you have some kind of situation where you refuse to hear the truth about it because it's just going to upset you, but deep down you're worried about it, so you keep on thinking about it even though you don't want to hear the results of the test or some kind of thing like that. You have that. And it just hangs over you and you don't know, right? So there's that part of it. And then there's lying where the lie is, people are going to find out. Like you can't say like, some of you did something or something happened when inevitably people are going to talk to the other people involved. And they're going to say, no, that guy's full of shit. And it's going to come around. Like that kind of lying is unbelievably stressful. Especially when, people are hanging on your every moment, every word. And, you have a fragile ego like Trump does. And at some point, it's going to become like, why did you make that deal if you fucking kicked the shit out of him? You mean you kicked the shit out of Iran and you gave them the Strait of Hormuz and they didn't even have it before? Like they have more stuff now. They have more stuff than they had before you started bombing them. So that means you lost, right? He'll make up some bullshit, but no one's going to buy that except for the dumb fuck Trumpers.
He's been a sort of a moderate person over his lifetime, not a smart person, but a somewhat vicious person, I will say. If you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry because he's vicious. What he did with his political opponent and all of the people that he hurt a lot of people, Biden. And so I really don't feel sorry for him.
This must have been a while back when Trump and Musk were doing the Doge thing. It's now come out that Doge is a failure, which of course it was. But he's talking about Joe Biden after everyone found out he got a cancer diagnosis. And he's, saying, well, I don't feel sorry for him because he's so vicious. Guy's beaten. When he got denuded by Kamala Harris and he had that disastrous debate performance, you can let it go. You let it go with fucking Hillary. Hillary punked you in the last debate. She owned you in the final debate. It was a miracle that he fucking won the election. Of course, we all know that was part of the whole thing. And Hillary and you went at it much worse than you and Biden went at it. Only Biden beat you, so you're still being a little bitch about it. But, he went out and told this gray shit in his pants. Fucking, senile as fuck. That the worst debate performance, except for Fetterman's, right? And, you can let off the gas, bro. I mean, this is like you got diagnosed with cancer. You could fucking, just say, yeah, I feel so. He's in my prayers or some bullshit thing. Even though you don't pray. So just say something. But he's such a vicious person. I don't feel bad. What the fuck? The GAO's audit uncovered several systemic errors that call into question the data Doge published on its wall of receipts. Inflated lease savings of 264 leases Doge claimed to have terminated. 108 were already in the process of ending before the agency was even created. Non-existent contract cancellations. Doge did not provide accurate information of contract terminations. For example, the site claimed $1.7 billion in savings from a Department of Defense contract that was never actually terminated. The report noted that Doge did not use its stated methodology to calculate about half of the savings it reported and failed to disclose data quality issues. Trump was right about everything, remember? And so he's getting punked on his own site. Just a flock hammer in the middle of a golf course with zero traffic. So here's a flock hammer in a golf course. There might be a road next to it. Like, we don't know what's on the thing, but, you know. So there's that. Trump's hair. There's just a lot of those. I wish Erica was not a widow. Sadly, I'm not sure she feels the same. I wanted my husband's job, and I couldn't be happier. Erica Masad Kirk. Advice on how to grieve differently. Remember, she was grieving. This is when she was grieving. This is like 5 days after. And she was on a conference call with people. And she was talking about how people grieve differently. And she was smiling and laughing and being all happy. Like, everyone knows she wanted that fucking job. Do you think about these friends? And so, like, she's just classic. And look at the guy here. Howard Lutnick is the one person you might not recognize. So that's great. Okay, this is probably the best one. Boom. Look at him go. That's probably my favorite one there. Yeah. All right, there he goes. There's Trump for you. Look at him go. Look at him breakdance. I mean, he's so multi-talented. Once you got that hair, he became so multi-talented. There. This is great right there. All right. Look at him go. Okay, the Miriam Adelson thing here. Part rocker, part Miriam. These two guys. That's great. And then NBA unveils new logo to be more inclusive. And so, the WNBA, I'm sorry. They're getting hammered because they just, can't stop stepping on their dicks, right? Caitlin Clark explains the white privilege feels weirdly like getting beat up by giant black lesbians. And dudes, I think I talked about Enos Cantor, Freedom Cantor. And I forgot the other guy's name. I think the guy had panic attacks when he had to fly. He had a phobia towards flying or some other thing. So he ended up, I don't know where he's playing, maybe in Europe or something. But both these guys are pretending to be trans, and, it's going to cause a whole thing. The real question is they should say, are there biological males playing in the WNBA now, right? Because, they wouldn't answer, but, they might be able to be forced to. But anyways, it's a fucking shit show. This video kind of got away from me. When I did a 1 hour voiceover 2 days ago. And then, just all the weird stuff and kind of a weird day timing-wise. And then I took that long-ass nap, and so it's now 8:30. My wife and I were watching TV. I came in here for a little bit because she fell asleep, so I thought I'd finish the video. But I already have shit for tomorrow. Like, it's a never-ending, there's this really interesting thing to do with TPUSK, where the twinks are realizing that that young people, right-wing young people, hate their guts, right? Like people who used to be TPUSK people or people who are, their target audience are like just unbelievably against them and Erica. But anyways, let's wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano definitely reporting from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.